It is pumpkin season here at Gerton's, and I am surrounded by the most beautiful selection of what many of you would probably consider decorative or doorstop pumpkins here. But in fact, this entire display of pumpkins that I am standing in back of all have culinary uses. In fact, the majority of these pumpkins were not bred for their beauty, although they definitely are beautiful. They were in fact bred to be used in the kitchen. A lot of these are heirloom varieties. A lot of these are pumpkins that were meant to be cooked with. So it's time to explore a little bit about what we can do with our pumpkins here at Gerton's. So I have gathered together a little assortment of some of our most popular baking and cooking pumpkins. We have, of course, the basic pie pumpkin, which is probably the only pumpkin that anybody really thinks of as a pumpkin that you would do any kind of cooking with. We also have the Casper pumpkin, which is a white flesh pumpkin, beautiful for jack-o'-lanterns, of course, but awesome eating as well. We have blue pumpkins. Blue pumpkins such as Jarrahdale are actually my favorite pumpkin to bake with. They have an incredibly smooth custard-like flesh, which means that when you put them in a pie or you put them in a recipe, you are getting the most smooth, creamy, wonderful pumpkin tasting experience you will ever have. I love a blue pumpkin for baking and cooking. It is just phenomenal to work with. We have red warty thing over here, which is a kind of goofy, silly looking pumpkin, very decorative, of course, but once you get through this super thick skin, you actually have several pounds worth of really good, meaty, textured pumpkin to work with for your more savory. So if you're like a pumpkin soup person, you're a pumpkin casserole or side dish person, red warty thing is an excellent pumpkin. Just make sure you're pulling out that really strong serrated knife to get through the flesh, or even a cleaver and a rubber mallet, because you're going to need a little help getting through this big thick skin. A lot of our green pumpkins are very similar to the blue pumpkins as far as the quality of their flesh. And then I wanted to put a special shout out here to this guy. Now, the Cinderella style pumpkins, these all hail originally from France, called Rouge Vie de Tomf, which means basically the red pumpkin from the Tomf area of France. And I apologize for my French. I am not French. And it probably was a terrible pronunciation. I'm sorry if I butchered that. But here she is. This is what we would consider a cheese pumpkin. A couple of reasons they call it that. Number one, it looks like a wheel of cheese, right? So it's flat and orange, just like a wheel of cheese. But it also works in a lot of recipes, French recipes in particular, that are prepared this time of year. If you're looking into some French cuisine, if you're looking into European pumpkin recipes, you want to make sure you're cooking with this to ensure that the taste and quality that you're expecting out of that recipe is living up to what the recipe is asking you to get. So if you're going for like a French pumpkin casserole or a French pumpkin soup, this is the kind of pumpkin that you want to make sure you're buying. Now, we're going to circle back, of course, to the American classic pumpkin pie, which has been around with us as long as stories of pilgrims. And this is my special pumpkin recipe. Again, I made it with one of these guys. And I'm going to take you through some of the basic steps of making a pumpkin pie. For those of you who are really savvy cooks and bakers, my recipe has some slight differences to Libby's, just because that's how I prefer the taste. What you want to do is you want to start out with a good fleshed baking pumpkin, so something with sweeter flesh. You want something with a little bit higher sugar content. I like the blue pumpkins because I feel like, again, that custardy flesh, that soft finish, you're not going to get that from a lot of other pumpkins. But of course, if you're more comfortable with a smaller amount of pumpkin, feel free to grab a pie pumpkin. There's a reason we call them that, right? So you can use these little guys too. Pumpkins and squash are from the same family. Initial preparation and roasting is exactly the same. So you cut it in half, you scoop out the seeds, and you'll find that this is a much more pleasant experience with culinary pumpkins than it is with a jack-o'-lantern. Jack-o'-lanterns are very wet. They have very high moisture content, which makes them really easy to scoop out the guts. But it also makes them kind of gooey and unpleasant to touch. And I actually find working with these pumpkins to be a fairly pleasant tactile experience. They're not wet. They're actually fairly meaty and dry. So you really can kind of get in there with your hands. You don't need to have to use a spoon if you don't want to. But you're going to scoop out all the seeds, save those and roast those as you would for any other pumpkin seed. All of cucurbit seeds are edible. So make sure you're roasting your seeds because throwing them in the trash is such a waste of a really good, healthy snack. So a little butter, let them dry off on the counter, a little butter, a little salt, into the oven at 275 until they're golden brown. You can thank me later, I promise. So we're going to cut this guy open. We're going to remove the seeds. We're going to save the seeds for roasting. We're going to put oil, veggie oil, canola oil, whatever your favorite kind of low oil. You can even use an olive oil, although I wouldn't use that for pie recipes because that olive oil will stick in the flesh and you will kind of feel that olivey taste. Oil those guys up, put them face down so that they look like this, okay, on the sheet, so that your half is right here and your other half is right here. And then you're going to bake them at 375 for at least an hour to an hour and a half. Of course, this little guy is going to bake a lot faster than this big guy, right? So you can test to see if your pumpkin is ready by grabbing a fork and trying to stab it through the cooked pumpkin. If it goes in, no problem, bing, you're done. If it's resistant, you've got to wait a little bit. So it's okay to check the oven, you know, test yours, starting with little guys at about 45 minutes, with big guys probably an hour and 15 minutes. Just start testing the flesh to see if you have gotten to where you need to be, where it's cooked all the way through. You let it rest, let it cool on the counter, and then you can scoop out the innards, put them in a blender, blend it until you have a nice smooth puree. And then if you're not ready to use it right away, just throw it in a Ziploc bag right in the freezer. So very, very easy to store. You can pull that freezer bag out when you're ready, defrost it, you're good to go. If you want to do your baking right away, let it cool to room temperature, immersion blend, then right into your recipe. For this pie, I used 2 cups of pumpkin puree. You're going to be using sweetened condensed milk, okay, so not evaporated milk, sweetened condensed milk, a nice blend of pumpkin pie spices. A lot of companies make really nice pie spice mixes, and you can just use about 2 teaspoons of pie spice mix. But in my pies, I use cinnamon, clove, nutmeg, and allspice. So I don't use ginger. And all of that goes in together. I refrigerate that filling for at least an hour or overnight. And that everybody's like, whoa, wait. You don't put the filling into the oven right away? And the reason that I do that is if you let it sit refrigerated and covered, the pie spices actually have the chance to kind of marinate into the pie filling. And you get a much more evenly spiced and really yummy tasting pie filling if you allow that time for the pie spices to really infuse through the filling. If it's for Thanksgiving, do it the night ahead. Like, just mix that, throw it in the fridge, bake the pie in the morning. By the time everything is cooled down, throw it in the fridge, you're ready to serve that night. So much easier than trying to figure out how to do your pie and your turkey and your stuffing and your mashed potatoes all on the same day. No, no, no. We do the pie beforehand. We throw it in the oven that day. And then again, it's going to be 425 for 15 minutes and then another 40 to 15 minutes at 350. So that the reason that you do it that way is then you have no cracks. You can see this pie filling, beautiful, absolutely solid. You don't have any overflow because I didn't overfill the pumpkin, the pie filling. So only use as much filling as it takes to fill out to about 1/4 of an inch from the top. Don't overfill your pie pan. It will rise on its own. And then you have a beautiful pie ready to cut and ready to eat. And I guarantee you this pie tastes amazing. Even though I'm a garden person, I also love talking about baking and the culinary uses of plants. I love ornamental edibles. So I'm here to chat with you. If you ever want to share any baking tips, I'm here for you. We look forward to hearing from you too. Share your favorite recipes in this feed. I would love to see what you guys have to come up with. Maybe somebody has a pumpkin ravioli recipe or a pumpkin soup recipe to share with me. I would love to try those this autumn. And I hope you're excited to try some pumpkin recipes too.